This video is a sort of a follow-up to my 357 minimum caliber video. I didn't think it was enough to say that the 375 minimum requirement was not helpful, and I wanted to give more information that was actually practically helpful. Once I do that, I'm going to go over in chronological order some of the interesting firearms related things that I've learned from Uganda's early game department reports. Let's start off by comparing a custom 270 load at the top with the 460 Weatherby load at the bottom of the chart. Even though that the 460 Weatherby has significantly more power and momentum, it only gives 2 more inches of penetration in wood than the 270 did. So if you can kill an elephant with a 458 Win Mag that has less penetration than the 270, then it requires no stretch of imagination to understand that you can kill an elephant quite easily with this 270 round. You are also probably wondering why is this the case, so I'll explain that. First of all, when you shoot 460 Weatherby rounds into wood and then compare them against the slower 460 short A-square using the same bullet, you notice that the 460 Weatherbys have less penetration despite their greater energy. For both of these calibers, the bullets that were recovered were intact. They didn't deform. This information comes from a book, and the author of that book says that the reason for this happening is not fully understood. He then gives a theory about how, at this short distance, it was possible that the 460 Weatherby bullet had not fully stabilized yet, which he believes may be the answer. I've mentioned in my African game series of videos that if you stabilize the same bullet more with faster rifling, you can achieve straighter and deeper penetration. So the author's theory isn't quite correct. It's not that the bullet hasn't had time to stabilize. It's that if the bullet twist is the same, and if the bullet is the same, significantly more velocity can result in a less stable bullet and less penetration. So if someone wants to build the best rifle for elephant, then they would obviously have to do testing with faster twist rate barrels. However, that's only half the reason why the 460 Weatherby has only marginally better penetration than the 270 round. The other half of that reason is that the 270 is a smaller diameter bullet, which means it encounters less resistance and therefore requires less energy to penetrate the same distance. Just to be completely clear though, that 270 had high sectional density and a solid copper bullet, which allowed it to be compared favorably against large caliber bullets that were specifically made for use on elephants and other big game. In comparison, standard 308 full metal jacket bullets have poor penetration through wood because their copper jacket is too weak to allow the bullet to stay perfectly intact. Let's look at another penetration chart and compare the 577 Nitro Express at the top and the 30-06 near the bottom of the chart. 120 grain 30-06 is actually capable of out-penetrating the 577 Nitro. So let's just say that you have 30-06 ammunition that on average penetrates slightly more than your 577 ammo does. Would there be any reason to choose your 577 if it has far more unpleasant recoil than your 30-06? The reason why people use large caliber rifles on elephants is because larger calibers have more momentum and more concussive effect. To stop an elephant that is charging at you, you either have to stun the elephant by concussing the brain with the impact of the bullet hitting the skull, or you have to kill it outright by penetrating the brain. A 270 that penetrates more than a 450 Win Mag is obviously better at reaching the brain and therefore damaging it, but it doesn't have nearly the concussive effect that the 458 Win Mag does. Because of this fact, it is generally accepted that if you are in close quarters with an angry elephant, it is more dangerous to have a small caliber rifle because there is effectively no margin for error. As a rule, this is generally correct, but there are cases where elephants have been knocked unconscious with small caliber rifles and have failed to be stopped or stunned with large caliber rifles. Exceptions obviously don't negate a rule that is generally true. Because of his experience, this author does not believe that anyone using a small caliber rifle would last long if he did full-time elephant control work under the same conditions that this author had to endure. This is obviously a prediction, not an indisputable statement of fact. He also believes that W.D.M. Bell had a comparatively easier time killing elephants for several reasons, like open country, mostly dealing with herds of cows and calves instead of bulls, and Bell was hunting elephants that did not understand what rifle fire was. I don't believe that his assessment is exactly 100% true though, because Bell was an ivory hunter, and obviously bulls have the largest tusks. It's also been a while since I've read Bell's books though, so it's possible that I'm wrong. Let's set aside the details of Bell's work though, and talk about the Uganda Game Department. For a while, a lot of their folks were armed with small caliber .303 rifles. Just how long this was, I do not know because I only have access to a limited amount of their reports. Regardless, they place an emphasis on their belief that .303 rifles are really not good for shooting elephants with. In the areas with tall grass, they had the guards work in pairs to overcome the general lack of concussive effect that their rifles had. Obviously, tall grass limits your visibility and greatly increases the chance that you will encounter an angry elephant at very close range. So to give more of a margin for safety and to ensure more accurate shooting, the majority of shooting done was from trees. Because of this, the guards were sometimes knocked out of trees by the elephants as they rushed away from the sound of gunshots. Obviously, this is inherently dangerous work regardless of the caliber of the rifle used. However, it seems to be the case that using .303 rifles under such difficult conditions is not ultimately guaranteed death, as the previous author might believe. It is very interesting as well to mention that these specific guards were only permitted to make body or heart shots on elephants because the tall grass would generally prevent them from making headshots, and to make a poor attempt at a headshot would only result in a wounded elephant getting away when you could have made a fatal heart shot in the body. Since they were not satisfied with the .303 rifles, they chose .470 double-barreled rifles to replace them. However, these new .470 rifles had some issues. First of all, these weapons were unreasonably difficult to break open after you had fired the 2 shots, which is obviously a serious problem. Second of all, the striker springs were too weak to reliably hit the primers hard enough. This was also a large problem because it resulted in misfires. Given these issues, it should not be surprising that Mr. Banks decided to use a .404 bolt-action rifle instead to kill 40 elephants with 100 rounds of ammunition. His accurate shooting gave him the average of 2.5 rounds fired per elephant killed. As problems with the .470 rifles continued to add up, they decided to hold a board on the matter, and the .470s were condemned by all and recalled from use. Consequently, .303 rifles were temporarily reissued. Additionally, we have an interesting comparison between the year 1925 and 1926 for the Toro district. When using small caliber .303 rifles in 1925, they killed only 51 elephants, and in 1926 they killed 157 elephants, or roughly 3 times as many. This is an indisputable demonstration of the importance of the greater concussive force of large caliber rifles when shooting elephants in an area that has dense cover and tall grass. We should keep in mind though that we are talking about comparing relatively slow to fire bolt action .303s to double barrel .470s that give you a relatively fast second shot. Also, elephant control operations, or shooting elephants that raid crops, is much different than regular folks going out and selectively hunting elephants. It is also worth mentioning that an elephant was instantly killed with a single 6.5 by 53R to the heart. A second elephant in this instance was shot near the heart with the same rifle, and was dropped but not killed instantly. If an elephant can be instantly killed with a heart shot, this would seem to suggest that it is possible to cause indirect central nervous system damage with the rifle, even if this is a rare event. I don't at all question whether this event actually happened either, because this is an official government report and they would have absolutely no reason to misreport or fabricate such an event. Due to the issues with the previous rifles, they started to issue .425 Westley Richards bolt actions. The actual bullet diameter for these cartridges is .435, not .425 by the way. They said that the new .425 rifle is magnificent from the point of killing, but was limited for quick handling in close quarters shooting. I don't know the details of this rifle, but it is very likely that they meant that the .425 was somewhat unwieldy due to its overall length and weight. The .425 Westley Richards rifles had then been widely issued. Two types of ammunition was available from Westley Richards. One was a standard non-expanding bullet that was described as being flattish or snub-nosed. This was likely a round nose with a flat point, and it was stated that this bullet was more than 50% superior for quick shooting at close quarters. The second type of bullet was a pointed or Spitzer bullet that was specially reinforced. The stated purpose for this reinforcement is greater penetration. Pointed ammunition is generally not preferred for use on dangerous game for two reasons. The distances involved are not great, so the better aerodynamics of a pointed bullet are largely irrelevant. The second reason is that pointed or round-nosed ammunition have a greater tendency to deflect on impact than a standard flat-nosed bullet. With that in mind, this special reinforcing on the pointed ammunition is without a doubt some kind of advantage, and it was likely a thick steel jacket probably covered in copper. Bullet technology back then was not consistently good, and any deliberate attempt to improve on it was a step in the right direction. As these rifles began to be used more and more, it was noticed that the magazine spring is extremely delicate, which is obviously very concerning. There was also a more minor problem with the wood stock that was easily fixed. At the end of the day, though, the 425s and the people who were using them were definitely effective because they were not using more than 4 rounds for each destructive animal killed. As problems with the 425 rifles were discovered, the game warden visited the Westley Richards company to talk about these issues. It was assumed at the time that the rifles made after this point would be better built. It is doubtful that these attempts to fix the problems were completely successful, because in 1935 they were replaced with the 404 Jeffery rifles once the new rifles had undergone an extensive trial. The bullet diameter of this cartridge is actually 422, and not 404 like the name would imply. They also mentioned that it was inevitable that the new 404 would be criticized because it has a smaller bullet diameter and less power when compared to the previous 425 Westley Richards. It seems to be common for people to assume that bigger is always significantly better, even if that's not always the case. Actual experience proves that the new 404 was certainly effective enough for animals like elephant and buffalo. The difference in power between the old 425 and the new, less powerful 404 may have been as much as roughly 1,000 foot-pounds, or it may have been somewhat less. Regardless, this difference in power seemingly did not result in any measurable drop in effectiveness on actual animals. The Mango Guard, for example, killed a total of 126 animals with 244 rounds of ammunition, giving an average of less than 2 rounds used per animal. These were mostly buffalo, but some elephant and hippo as well. It's easy for us to see why the game department made the choices they did, because they were facing fundamental mechanical issues with certain rifles. I also want to say that double rifles have some inherent problems. First of all, they are very expensive because they require the factory to zero both barrels to shoot at the same target at a specific range. If you decide to use a different kind of ammunition, there is no guarantee that the 2 barrels will both be putting rounds in the same spot. It is my opinion that it is better to have a fixed barrel and the second barrel be made so that the user can manually adjust it. This solves the problem of separate points of impact with certain ammunition, and it also means that you can zero your rifle at whatever distance you like. However, you will still have the problem that you can only have 2 rounds in a loaded rifle. If you had a 3-barrel rifle, that would significantly increase cost and weight, and that still might not be enough ammunition. Standard bolt actions have less problems overall, but they are still not very fast to fire. This wouldn't be such a problem if a large caliber always guaranteed a stunned elephant, even with a poorly made headshot. So on that note, I think it would be interesting to hear what your opinions are for the best way to solve this problem of stopping a charging elephant.